Yeah.
screen. I just sometimes find it easier to do. Okay, good morning, everyone. It is 9:34, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. Most members of council are here. Councillor Spicer advised he was going to be a few minutes late. We also have our CAO with us, Deepak Joshi, and we also have virtually our assistant CAO, Colleen Saylor, who is actually recording the minutes today and has our video going. And we also have our Public Works Supervisor, or Manager I should say, Greg Elson is with us this morning because there's a number of items on our agenda this morning dealing with Public Works. So with that, I will call the meeting to order. And is there a resolution to adopt the agenda, please?
Quick question. Are we able to talk about another item regarding the Grand Marais issue?
Well, we...
Just like in either in we can't be out of the agenda.
Whatever's on the agenda is all we can discuss
Okay,
today.
that's fine.
If you want to have an informal discussion now.
Informal after? Okay, then it's just find out where it's at.
Okay, do we have a resolution for the adoption of the agenda this morning?
Resolve the agenda for the meeting be adopted as circulated.
Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Vazerovich, Councillor Strang, second. Any further discussion? And as our CAO has mentioned, we cannot add anything to the agenda as it is a special meeting, so we will discuss what is on here in our special meeting today. So with that, I have a mover, have a seconder. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Okay, so we're at number 3 on our agenda, and that is the new and other business, and there's a number of things there, a lot to do with public works and the environment. So the first thing, 3.1, is the 2020 roadworks request for quotes. And Deepak, I don't know if you want to comment or if I'm just going to turn it over to Greg.
I can introduce Greg. This is for the RFP to award the roadworks for our concrete or works associated with the plan that was already established by council. So I'll let Greg move forward on it.
Okay, go ahead, Greg.
Okay, so we did the tenders.
Just before you go any further, I think we're going to have to either get you to speak up or get you a mic, because I don't know that Colleen can hear you.
Okay.
Good morning, Councillor Spicer.
Good morning. Sorry I'm late.
Hello? Can you hear me, Colleen?
Get out late, we just started.
Hello? Oh, she's
She's got a thumbs up.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we went for tenders this for the roadworks, and I believe I made a mistake. Depends which copy you did have. In the totals, the left-hand column is the correct numbers. The right-hand column was from a previous decision paper that I didn't take out by accident. Sorry about that, for that confusion, but they are in the right order, and those are the correct bids in the left-hand column.
Greg, if I could just interrupt you though, if we look at our agendas, we only have one column.
Sorry, he fixed it.
That's okay, I have the paper copy where I have the 2 columns. So.
Okay. Yeah, so then Deepak did fix it. So those are the correct numbers. You can see the top 2 bids were really close. To remind you, with some of the work, this budget or this tender was based on Old Henderson doing some of the underground land drainage system, storm sewer, call it. But it was only, in this tender, it was only going to go from Colville just south to just north of Strathcona, is what the original tender called for. We always wanted to go farther south down to Church. And so these bids came in. You can see the top 2 bids are really close. A special note of interest that I said I would bring forward is that Chabot Enterprises is local, so I wanted to make note of that. As far as the budget goes, and Deepak, you can jump in here too, if I go a little bit awry. These numbers came in about 5% over what we thought they were gonna be. There is money to cover this within the road reserves. There's further money to cover this to go the extra down Old Henderson to Strathcona. And that's what we're really recommending, is that we go on Colville to Church, fill in that gap, and spend the money from the road reserves.
So, to make it clear, what this is when the tender went out, the quotes came back at a unit price level, so which allows us to expand the overall project size than what was tendered out. And so what Greg is suggesting is that we increase the works that's going to be done. In order to accomplish that, we have is an opportunity to utilize existing funds. So to make it as clear, further clarity, what it is that he's suggesting in adding on the works that he's identified in here for Old Henderson. What that does is it gives an opportunity to increase the budget that was budgeted here by $175,000. There was already previous work done, so the budget that was there was already being able to take that into, taking that into consideration. What we have in our budget from last year is $150,000, which is a line item to deal with plan, engineering, or other variances that might occur. Taking that and the adjustment to the budget, we can make this work. We're meeting the requirements of being able to not need any additional funds and utilize the budget within the road reserve budget that was established for this. So just wanted to make sure that you knew that this is part of the recommendation. Council will still have to authorize it to increase beyond what the original approval was for. But what Greg's suggesting is to increase it on Old Henderson from the north side of Strathcona south to Church, which is what was originally hoped to be accomplished this year.
Go ahead, Councillor Strang.
Just to clarify, Bayview is a construction company that's not local. Where are they from?
I'm assuming Winnipeg, I don't remember
Oh,
exactly.
Yeah, they're from Winnipeg, yeah.
Okay, I thought maybe, like,
No,
Bayview.
yeah.
They're a big company now, they used to do a lot of work for Launch, and
Yeah.
then they kind of got bigger and bigger and bigger off of Launch.
and you've seen their work in,
I have.
Okay.
They're good. They're fine. And Chubby's Chabot is probably fine. It's close, but we were recommending Bayview. Chubby's not gonna be happy with my recommendation, but that's our recommendation.
Just to make a couple of things clear there. First, Bayview does a lot of work out of Winnipeg, and they do a lot of big projects, but are located in the RM of McDonald, inside the perimeter of Winnipeg, but are the RM of McDonald. The other is they do have a lot of experience in working with hard surface roads, and part of the issue is that we are looking at Chabot, but we looked at that, and that was it wasn't a factor because we're going with the lowest bid as required by the tender.
Councillor Spicer had his hand up and also Councillor Vasilevich. So Councillor Spicer, go ahead.
Yeah, so just quickly, I guess it's part of the extra work, I guess it comes down to do it now or do it later, right? I guess, because we have our 10-year plan and it shows how much money we would have at the end of this year, and with our plan works and our planned revenues going in, of course that's going to drop, but then it may cost more later to do the same work, so potato, potato.
Correct, Councillor. I think it's also important to recognize that this is still within the budget that was identified out of the road reserve, and that's our intent here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vasilevich.
Yeah, just a comment, history. The newer members Chabot may still end up doing the work because these companies, they get so busy that they subcontract. We've seen this in the south end.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Boulanger.
Just quickly, it says the actual bid price, even the lowest, is about $43,000 over budget. Is that, like, I mean, these guys have that much work? This all went in the spring to them, or like, I'm just surprised that it's that high over budget, that they weren't more tighter on their,
Well, I think in some discussions that I've had with our CAO, I mean, we thought after COVID was kind of slowing down and we'd get some good prices. Unfortunately, it's turning out to be the opposite. Everything is coming in
I
higher.
see that, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just this, it's a lot of other things that Deepak and I spoke about. If you want to give a little bit more detail, it just seems that people are charging more now, and we thought it would be totally opposite to get some work and get going and things like that. So Deepak and then Dave.
I've been talking to some people in the construction industry, and what's been occurring is that there's been a difficulty in trying to retain the staff due to the COVID and as the projects have been coming in. And some of the people that I've talked to that went out to tenders for larger projects, whether they're constructing, some of them were constructing schools and other projects, they're coming in at about 30% higher, they were telling me. And so for us, this is reasonable, very reasonable as to the price. And there's some level of construction inflation, but I think what was anticipated as the mayor has already mentioned, that COVID, there would be people looking for additional work. I think what's happening is the ability to ramp up has been very difficult due to many factors.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Horvis.
In the tendering process there, if something's over tender, is there any way we can go back to these guys and say, this project is over budget by 5%? Are you willing to take that 5% back and give it to us at our tender? Take the 5% away from them, the 5% away from Chabot. Can we not go back to these guys and negotiate that?
Councillor, what it is, what it is a tender process. As part of the tender process, basically you're receiving what you're getting, and you have to sort of be obligated as part of that. What you do have is that this tender process is part of a unit pricing. So there was a list of detailed works in there, which Public Works goes through a very extensive process of making sure that they've listed out all those details. Then they manage that. So generally speaking, there's always a little bit of fluctuation. What we're doing is basing it on our original budget and the amounts. This is what it's going to come down to.
No.
It could come down 10 or 20% later as we're managing the budget and realizing we don't need all those pieces of works, and depending on the level of detail that happens.
Yep.
Greg, do you want to explain it any further?
No, I understand all that, I know all that, but I'm just wondering initially, like lots of times when these things go out, and then our past experiences, they said, okay, you're over budget, we can't tender this, so they come back to the lowest and they say to him, can you do this, for what's on budget? And then that option's open. I'm just wondering, there's 50 grand there for us, that puts us in that 150 that you're looking for there.
Yeah.
That's because the Sure's, whatever, they're gonna be where they're saying they're gonna be. I'm just wondering if we don't have that. I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask, is what I'm saying,
Good point, Councillor. There is always an opportunity to go back and say to all the bidders in the tender process that you've not met some of our requirements and that we want to go back. If we do that, we're looking at probably another delay of another month, if not longer. And would have to have another meeting to be able to make that decision. So council, to give us the authority to be able to award this contract would be delayed as part of it.
You'd have to, why would you have to retender? You can't just go.
Not
to the lowest?
not retender. What we're going back is to give every person that responded to the tender to the opportunity, unless you identified in the tender itself that you were only going to work with the lowest bidders. Because when you go back to the other suppliers or the workers to say that the companies that you'd like them to look at lowering the price, the ones that were a little bit higher could argue, I didn't get that option and I would have possibly come in lower. So what you do is you go back to all the, there's a total of 6 companies, and you'd say the prices are all too high and we'd like you to look at cutting your prices, which could adjust dramatically.
And not necessarily down, not necessarily down.
Yes.
I guess my question is there a difference, like if this is a tender process, to me that's one thing, but if you went out and just
Proposal.
called for quotes
Yeah, or proposals.
or proposals, is that different? Could it
Yes.
be done differently then?
RFPs generally allow you to do exactly what Councilor Horvis is talking about.
Okay.
RFPs will give you an opportunity to do a little bit of negotiation and to be able to negotiate with the lowest bidders. And it's part of the overall
Was
process.
this invitational, or was it out there for everybody?
Out there for everybody.
Okay.
Okay, anything else on the prices? I guess, Greg, I kind of missed what you had said. To do Old Henderson from Strathcona to Church, what was the additional cost?
175.
175?
That's-
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I
So,
guess the reason I ask that is because from when, I don't know exactly when that other work was done, when we did that drain and put a new culvert under Old Henderson to go from the drain to the track,
Yeah.
I noticed that it's starting to slump there and there's kind of a dip there and it's kind of cracking up a little bit further to the south, so
Yeah.
I mean, if we could find the money and make it the whole road, then it's all done. Rather than do part of it this year and part of it next year or 2 years from now. If we could find that extra money, that would be great.
Well, that dip's not far from there, right?
Pardon
It's
me?
not far from where you're saying.
No.
Yeah.
Well, what they're saying is they're just gonna go to the north side of Strathcona. Well, that dip is just on the south side of Strathcona where they put that culvert through Old Henderson, so. Go ahead, Councillor Spicer.
That's not a speed reduction device?
Not recently, no. It's the, yeah, that one's by Charlie's, and it's the water hazard that's the speed control in front of the churches some days.
Let's hope that gets fixed someday.
I hope, well,
I think it's part of it.
I think it might be part of this, is that correct, Greg?
Pardon me, sorry?
The water problem in front of the church, is that part of this fix?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's, and I'm not sure with Chabot's work partially too on the underground work.
Right,
And I think that's a little bit also why the prices came in a little higher. Keep in mind, this is an engineering estimate. Hate to give away secrets, but I'm getting older. It is reflective on the engineering thing, but if he would have, he could have estimated it that much higher, it would have come in that much lower. But they generally, in Stantec's cases, they've always been under, that's right, they've always estimated it higher than what it's coming as. This is the first one that hasn't. I think it has something to do with the underground works, that the storm sewer that's going in there. It's gonna be a little touchy going in there with the utilities and stuff like that.
okay, anything else? Go ahead, Deepak.
to address your comment, Madam Mayor, if additional work needs to be, Greg can take a look at part of that. If we need to go in and use, to be able to do that, and there's an opportunity to, that we can't utilize all of the road reserve, if there's monies left over in some of our drainage and that, we'd have to come back to council. That doesn't have an impact. We could still assign the work and then come back to council for reallocating some of those funds. Because there would be savings in some of the drainage, because there are some drainage works that are part of this project. We just, in order to keep everything clear and clean, we're only using the road reserve as part of this project at this point.
Correct.
Right,
I know the decision paper mentioned about some opportunity to use some of the funding from the drainage works, but we've chosen not to do that because that would require an additional motion of council, and we said we could do that at a later point.
but if you're, if we're going to do some work and there is some drainage involved, like if the cost is I'm gonna use $300,000 and $100,000 of that is drainage, like in our working papers, could that just not be split off and charged to the drainage?
Only when I'm confident that the drainage works that have been happening to date,
Right,
like, it all sort of aligns properly.
Yes.
And that's what I'm suggesting, is I need to do that level of detail, working with Greg and our finance person, Shannon, to figure out, okay, exactly what are the funds and how can we move forward. This project was identified as part of the road reserve, not as part of the drainage. And so I want to make sure that that's kept clean as to where we're getting the funds from. Yes, we can begin to assign that, but I think we should come back to council for that motion.
okay, perfect. Any other questions or anything? Go ahead, Councillor Horbis.
Because of all that water sitting there in front of Rennie's and all that, couldn't that later, like you're saying, can we go for that drainage thing and take some of that money and then?
That's exactly what I'm saying, Council.
That's, I think we should go ahead with that extra work, for sure.
Well, it is getting fixed.
No, I mean,
The
to
whole
get
thing.
there, the whole
Yeah.
thing, do the whole thing, like, for the extra, what Greg's
Yeah.
asking for. I think we should do that now, because it's only gonna cost more later, and it's gonna make a mess of it, you know? There'll be a join there and all that stuff. This is so clean, so good. I
We've
think
got
we should
some-
do it. Yeah,
Sorry for interrupting, Councillor. We've got some flexibility. And what I'd like to do is go back and do the review of the overall drainage budget, see what we have. And there are some other items that we're going to discuss today, which may give us some flexibility on the drainage budget. And I'll take a look at all that and then report back to Greg on where we stand. And that gives you the flexibility. The contractor can be hired, and this is just a small add-on to part of that project.
Okay, if there is nothing else on the roadworks, we will move on. And I believe, do you have a resolution for later on this one, or do you want to do it now, Mr. Administrator?
We have a resolution for this right now.
Okay, so,
And so
okay, I'll get you to read the resolution if there's no further questions, comments, queries. Go ahead, please.
resolved that council accept the recommendations of the Public Works Manager authorizing the CAO to award the tender for the 2020 roadworks described above to the Bayview Construction for the estimated price of $1,193,310 plus GST. And further, that the Public Works Manager include paving of Old Henderson from Strathcona to Church in East Suffolk.
Okay, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Sutherland, Councillor Horbis is seconding. I guess I just have one, where it says described above. Do we need that in there? Because you're not going to have that in your minutes, are you? Like it says, the tender for the 2020 roadworks described above.
We'll have that in the final resolution then. Is that what you're looking for, madam?
No, I guess what I'm saying, it is in the resolution, but are you you're not gonna have all the whole decision paper in the minutes. Like the way this reads, resolve that council accept the recommendation of the Public Works Manager authorizing the CAO to award the tender for the 2020 roadworks described above. In the minutes, they're not gonna be described above.
Or you just take described above out,
Right,
because you have the recommendation.
yes,
Exactly, the report is part of it. Thank you, Madam Mayor. We can make that change.
okay. That's okay with the mover and the seconder, just to take that described above out, because it's not gonna be part of the minutes, so. Okay, one adjustment there. Any further comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, opposed, and that is carried. Okay, the next one we have on the agenda is, I believe it is the solid waste. And Greg, are you going to speak to that one?
I'm just gonna hand out that little handout, keypads, okay?
Definitely, I've also put some stuff up on the screen for the discussion purposes.
So if you remember, we talked a little bit about the land, our transfer stations, and I'll start with maybe the words potentially closing at some point. And there was some interest in knowing
Thank you.
what kind of use they had. So this is a little table of last year's use per site, as well as some tonnage there, just to give you some background information on that. So if we get, wherever we go, we have some solid data.
Really, these numbers aren't very far apart, it's pretty consistent.
Yeah, keep in mind Dunning and Clark were much higher, but because of the curbside, they've come down quite a bit. I don't have those numbers, but they've come down, I would guess, because I don't know, I ain't guessing, but I would say 30 to 60% they've come down, so they were that much higher. So they are split quite a bit. We've talked, if you look at tonnage at the very bottom, that's a good indicator too. The two south ones are obviously bigger than the other ones. And we know this, like internally, we know this, like the number of users in the south are more than the ones in the north. So this gives you an idea when we're talking about this. And this sort of leads into when we're talking about putting hydro to these sites. There was some pros and cons. Do you have that part, feedback up there, the pros and cons, or no?
The pros and cons of the hydro?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
maybe not.
No.
I don't know that I printed that, but I did print this. Like, the hydro for Gull Lake is gonna be way lower than the hydro at Grand Marais, for example. But the hydro at Clark is going to be way higher than Dunning, because Dunning is close by. You know, there's different ways of looking at this. I guess I'm of the mindset now that if, for other reasons too, there is East St. Paul there, but if you take Clark and you put a radius around Clark, this is the users of Clark, and instead of Dunning, which is at the edge of our RM, and similarly with Grand Marais, you don't go to the edge, you bring one in, and then you do your radiuses, and then you also have a landfill in the middle. So that gives you a rough idea of how far people are traveling to use a site. So that's sort of how we were looking at it. The con of that is, I mean, there's pros, the con is currently more people do use Grand Marais than they use Gull Lake. But as we've said, a lot of them are traveling back. The ease of access to Gull Lake is good, it's right off the highway. So there's gonna be pros and cons. Some people, if you do close a site, you're gonna make some people happy, you're gonna make some people unhappy. That's really how it's gonna go. So and that was some of the discussion that we had before, and there was some more recent discussion too, I think.
And if I could elaborate a little bit more on some of the recent discussions. One is that we know that there's been some discussions, and we're going to be having some further discussions with the union on this, that there is heat-related issues and overall usage of the bathrooms and so forth, and it's also a safety issue. So we know that we need to do power and services at our transfer stations. We can't put large generators because we don't have that level of security to be able to be confident those generators will be there past a closed weekend or something. The other part of that is that we're taking a look at this. I'm meeting with our communications company that's been assigned to do the work on the solid waste. So what we're looking to do is meet in August and hopefully be able to address this. What we'd like to do is address it in the sense going to the general public and saying, look, there are already access to the transfer stations in the area. There's 2 of them. These are the ones that we can provide better services for our own staff and people utilizing them. And if we close the other ones there are, what would you feel like, so that we can bring that part of the overall solid waste discussion. What we're also looking at doing is doing a review with sharing with other surrounding municipalities, in this case I have a call in, and then I'll be talking hopefully next week with the CIO from East St. Paul. And so if we did look at closing Dunning, there would be hopefully an opportunity for individuals to go and utilize the transfer station in East St. Paul. That sort of relates well with our overall sharing of services between the municipalities. The other component that I wanted to highlight for you is that with Dunning, if it closes, we have industrial lands right beside the Dunning station. There are 2 other parcels of land, so it gives an opportunity to maybe look at, it's already zoned as industrial, so we could look at somebody coming in and turn that into much more employable lands. It has access immediately to the highway, so it's much more valuable land, generally speaking.
Go ahead, Councillor Boulanger.
A couple of things. Drawing that circumference is a really good idea, because if you had the map and you drew that circle after Grand Marais was closed, you'd simply see that within that circumference or that circle, Gull Lake is right there, and the same with Dunning. I think it's an opportune time to, as soon as possible, move forward with this in terms of being able to use, the amenity thing for these workers at these sites is a concern. Hydro, water, washing facilities. To me, it just makes sense that when we start looking at the numbers and what it's going to cost to get these amenities in there, it only makes sense to close down. And I know the dialogue is continuing with East St. Paul. I know I've spoken with the mayor. I know many have here. I think they're more open to that. But whenever we talk about this, it'd be nice to be able to come up with some sort of a date once we get the public notification out there somewhat softer. I'm not sure how hard we're going to attack that, but
Yeah, well, I think once the administrator has the conversation with East St. Paul CAO and then with the blueprint to see how to move forward with this, I think, it is the intent that we do something by fall, have a date and everything. To me, it's the right way to go is closing Grand Marais and closing Dunning. I know though from past conversations, like a couple of years ago even, that getting hydro to Clark is going to be very expensive because you have to run it down the whole road, like from the end of the
Correct.
line. So I know when it was talked about before, it was very expensive. Now it's not going to get any cheaper, and if that's the way council wishes to go, I think, because of all the other factors that come into it now, and the safety issues and the health of our employees and everything else, or the amenities, as you say, I think now would be the proper time to do it.
one more thing.
Yes.
And again, I've said this before, and I think it's so important, and I know our staff does such a great job here in this, in terms of delivering the package to the public when we know folks in Grand Marais get upset at us for closing Grand Marais, if that's the direction we go. I think if something comes out informational-wise to say, look, council had some tough decisions to make. Here are the numbers. Here's what it was costing. We had to make some decisions. And I think when ratepayers see a good explanation, some may not like it, but I think if we take the time to do a real good explanation as to why we closed Grand Marais, that at least it's on paper, have some schematics, have some graphs, something to show the public that these are the reasons we did what we did. We didn't just throw a dart on the board and say we're closing Grand Marais because we want to get them all upset up there. No. I just think it's important that we come up with some really good stuff to show them.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, I guess we've kind of talked about different things for Grand Marais, and maybe if we could find something that we could do for Grand Marais this year, then that might help to kind of ease the pain. So, Councillor Bazarowicz, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, administration may want to contact Springfield. They have a transfer station sharing agreement with Broken Head, and find out what their model is and how they do it. I know they have a tag system, but beyond that, I'm not sure how they look at it or what the costs are.
Greg and then Councillor Spicer.
I know about that system. I haven't been there lately, obviously. One of the key things I will say about that, though, and it depends on how you look at it, what they were charging, the outside Broken Head was some money, but, it wasn't nearly the full cost, not like we weren't getting back the true cost. So I think they were looking at it more like, okay, we've already got the infrastructure, Springfield, we already got the infrastructure, we're paying for the infrastructure, how can we just sort of help reduce these costs? It wasn't like they were paying their fair share, like truly fair share. In a sense, it's kind of like the Gary Olson sort of a thing. Like you might make a deal with somebody because it's still to your benefits. There's a word for that, there's an accounting word for that, but I can't remember what that is. And two other points. Just creative, yeah. No, there's like diminishing value of returns or something like that. Just a couple other little things with closing the transfer stations. Keep in mind, we do have the bag increase on the table, and it's really expected that once the bag increase is going into place, Dunning and Clark will both go down in volume, and more people will go to the curbside program. Number two, there was some talk about seasonal curbside around Murray area. Anything's possible, but seasonal curbside is not going to be real cheap unless you find the person that fits that job, that has the equipment, because you've got a lot of cash outlay for half the year, sort of thing. So just keep that in mind. That was it.
Okay, Councillor Spicer, you had your hand up.
Is there any other options for electricity at these sites other than hydro,
Solar, maybe solar?
solar?
You can certainly look at that.
I guess part of the question would be, are we just looking at, I'll call it the trailer? Or is there other lighting, is there other requirements that we're looking at? Because if it's just the trailer, like I don't think your demand is gonna be huge.
Heat and air.
Well, no, it won't be huge, you're right. Like, there would be, well, I'm envisioning running water of some type, pump for that sort of a thing. And for sewer to pump out like holding tanks, those kinds of things. The idea of a light wouldn't be a bad idea. I know we don't run that late, but it's still not a bad idea for like in the wintertime when the lights start to get a little twilight there. Plus, they also might help secure the site too, like for people going in. We get a lot of sort of break-ins, whether they just break the gate lock. You know, we've actually got a new gate lock in there that makes it a lot harder for them to get the lock off.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's feasible or
I
not.
can,
The other thing that I was gonna mention to you is I know there's an adjoining municipality that just got new offices 2 or 3 years ago. And they do have the water tank and sewer tanks in the ground. So they have, like they were upgrading for the same reason.
okay.
So you might want to check with.
Is that Public Works out there? Okay, I saw that building, yeah.
They didn't do all of those, but I think they did 2 of them out of their sites.
Okay.
2 out of 3.
Okay, anything else on the transfers? Councillor Horvis?
Talking to one of the sewer guys the other day about that tender that they put up for the toilets, he suggested that we put a holding tank and put a toilet on top of the holding tank. I gotta agree with Councillor Spicer, to bring power into these places or whatever, I can't see it. Why do we have to do all this just because of our union, when all these other places are operating way below our standards? Our standards are way up there compared to anybody else. It's ridiculous what this infrastructure is gonna cost us. Like, it's just, I can't see it being worth it for these little stations.
Would help
This-
this
Well,
and
I don't-
safety as well.
I don't know if it's so much the union, I think it's more the well, it's through the union, but it's provincial health and safety regulations.
Yeah, well, why doesn't provincial health and safety go after all these other little places? Why?
Well,
are
it's
we-
just, It's just like we built our class 1 landfill on the premise that the province was gonna shut everybody else down, and they haven't done that either, you know,
So they come to us and shut us down, I wouldn't go jumping into all this stuff, we can't afford it.
They'll just rate ignore it. What they'll do.
Yeah, I mean, we can't afford this. And shutting these places down like this, there's gonna be a lot of bad people. Like you were saying, Rob, how are we gonna justify this? Well, there's 200-ton difference. Grand Marais, you wanna show them the difference, they're just gonna look at that and say, well, how come you're shutting us down when our volume is more than Gull Lake? Grand Marais' volume is almost as much as our landfill site.
Yeah, it's summertime, a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, not, you know, like,
The landfill, that's only, customers. That's customers, not
Yeah.
tonnage. Yeah, not tonnage.
but I mean,
Yeah.
it exceeds our landfill site, Grand Marais. Grand Marais is the busiest or whatever. Unless we just shut these places down totally in the wintertime. You know, for January, February, March, make everybody go to the landfill site. Because you've got no volumes then. What do you got, 200, 247, 277, nothing. You got nothing.
Okay, Councillor Boulanger.
I think it's not only the amenities of the hydro and the safety concerns. I think Greg and I, correct me if I'm wrong, did we not do the comparisons of actual costs to run these transfer stations at one time? I think we did. Like just not so much what's it gonna cost for hydro and bathrooms, but to date, what does it cost us in a fiscal year to operate all these transfer stations, each one? I think we have that data somewhere.
I think
And
Greg
that's-
does have that.
And that's bins, that's employee time, that's maintenance, that's all that stuff. I think that's what we originally were looking at. And then what pushed it harder was the safety thing. That's what really was gonna break the camel's back, so to speak. Because originally when we were gonna close these transfer stations, we were just looking at trying to cut some costs. Now the safety thing has almost perpetuated it. So I know what you're saying. Yeah, it's big
I don't
money to
think the
put.
safety thing was moving it. I think it was cost, we were looking at it.
Originally, yes, but I'm saying the safety thing now is pushing at its back door. It's really
Well,
making us make a decision, right?
it's there, but it's not there, you know, unless they're gonna enforce it, I don't think we should move on.
Yeah, that's a decision we
We
got.
can't afford to do it, I mean,
Go ahead, Deepak.
Madam Mayor, a couple of things. First, along with some of the safety, I did have a discussion with our fire department, and in the case of Gunning, they would prefer that one closed because they've had to deal with a lot more grass fires in the area because of the location and the burning pit that's there. They don't have that same issue in the Clark area.
It's also next door to a fuel station.
Exactly, so they're a little bit more concerned about it. The other is, what we're talking about is that here's the future implications. We're not necessarily saying we're going to implement everything until something comes forward to council. What we're talking about is identifying for you that there is a safety issue that's going to be coming in as a requirement that gives us an opportunity to do the proper forward thinking and planning to say that we can't afford to keep forced transfer stations running with these types of requirements. The level of implementation that we do on each one of those is dependent on our budget and our timing and requirements, and that'll all come through council. So that's not going to change, but the dialogue that we need to have with our citizens is saying, we have 4 transfer stations, there are expenses and there are safety implications that are forcing us to make some decisions, some hard decisions as we move forward. That's what that's about. The other part of this that I need to highlight is this solid waste discussion was also to let council know that I'm meeting with Blueprint and that we're going to start the dialogue on the solid waste bylaw that council had approved and put a delay on due to COVID for any further dialogue. We're now back at that stage, so what we're hoping to do shortly after August is to go start having that level of dialogue with our citizens with a plan with Blueprint, and we want to make sure council was aware of that. That includes tipping fees, all those other fees and discussions that were identified in the bylaw.
Go ahead, Councillor Horwath.
I was wondering if maybe that DPAC could look into, I know before we had talked about getting in touch with surrounding municipalities and At one time, we had mentioned about Kenora. I think we used to do stuff with Kenora, or we didn't do stuff with Kenora. Or somebody was saying that they might be looking for somebody to bring their garbage. In the back, we had asked about that, there was someone to get in touch with them to do that, and I don't know if it ever happened or it didn't happen. I was just wondering if DPAC could, try and get more business for our landfill site so we can justify having this class one. Trying to get, different municipalities interested, what we could do to generate more, to pay for these changes that we want to bring around or whatever,
Go ahead.
Make very good points, Councillor. Two things to that, two points to that question. And one is definitely I can look at it, and what we're doing is negotiating right now. You may or may not be aware, we already have an agreement with Beausejour at our landfill site, and so I've contacted the CAO there, and we're getting further information from that CAO so that we can, that agreement completed in 2019 with a 2-year extension. And so what I'm looking for is to clarify that 2-year extension. Kenora and any other users around here, we have to deal with this level 1. I've already had the talk with the mayor, and I've already had a discussion with the CEO or executive director, I'm not sure the title, for the Winnipeg Metro region, talking about now that they're doing a regional plan, we need to address that this community already has a level 1. There shouldn't be another level 1 created anywhere near any kind of a radius to us, and then whatever's necessary, turn that into a proper level 1 for regional purposes and make sure we have proper sharing. And that would help us to justify and also cost share with our surrounding municipalities.
We also have Lackawanna, don't we? We do that, Lackawanna use their stuff
I
for us?
think so, yeah.
We do have other communities, but we have a special agreement with Beausejour for them, and I just wanted to make you aware, and I'll probably be bringing that forward as soon as they've discussed it with their council.
Go ahead, Councillor Boulanger.
Quickly, good point about the metro region. And when you said that, I just could almost see ahead where you could see that happening, them getting together and going, oh, we're gonna build a Class A right over here. And like that, no way, no. You wanna build a Class A, whatever we call it, legal one, Class A or whatever we call it, Class 1, come there, we got it right here. And like, that's a very good, because if they tried to do that, I mean, that would be detrimental to us.
Well, and when they did some waste, I guess it was some, I don't know what you would call it. They were looking at where all the landfills and all the transfers and all the Class 1s were within the Winnipeg Metro region. When they did it the first time, unfortunately, Levo didn't even hit the map, and I kind of got a little frustrated, and I said, like, what are you doing? We have a Class 1 that is underutilized. Why can't we put that on the map? It is now on the map, but the complaint seems to be that it's, 3 miles off the road or whatever it is, and it's gravel. So what? It's like,
It's dust controlled.
yeah, but the other thing is, I don't think every transfer and landfill in the metro region is on a paved road.
Well, that's garbage trucks and semis, like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
I think they can
So
handle
I
it.
think that, with the Winnipeg Metro region moving forward and doing the regional plan, I know I keep pushing for, something to come our way, and now that Deepak is here with us, I think that he will be able
Definitely.
to push that forward also.
I
Awesome.
think they're starting meetings again, right? We had a little notice recently.
Yes.
It's not, the date hasn't been set,
Just
Okay.
another comment, Madam Mayor. Can
Okay.
we speak up a little louder when we're speaking, because Colleen still needs to hear the conversation to make sure we get our minutes.
Would it be easier if we all used our mics maybe?
If you feel
Maybe
comfortable, that'd be great.
Councillor Spicer, maybe you could use a mic, because I know I have to get Greg to use one, I can speak up. Councillor Horvis, you had one more remark to make.
I'd just like to say that, I'd like to commend Greg and his staff. When you drive into that dump now, the professionalism there, when you hit the scale, that girl there, professional, all the way in, that dump looks like a Class 1 dump now. It is very impressive.
We're getting there. Got a
Yeah,
couple
no,
more things to do.
it's, and even the staff, like, I had the honor of going there, taking the garbage there the other day. And they sent me up on the hill, and when I backed up in there, even the guy on the machine came off, you know, asked me, you know, whatever. Very,
Great customer service.
yes, exactly. I'm really impressed with that place now. It's come 150% around. It's really good.
Thank you.
Your guys are doing a hell of a
I'll be
job.
passing it on to the guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, anything else on the garbage? Or the solid waste, I should say. Okay, so moving on, we don't have anything to do on our solid waste. So the next one we have is our EMO tabletop training. And Deepak, if you can just go through that one for us.
As part of our requirements for emergency preparedness, we have to have regular tabletop exercises and prepare for the, hopefully never happens, a major emergency. Shelley Napier from, in discussions with Tyler, has identified that they're ready to do a tabletop exercise with staff and council. And what we have is some dates available. And what we wanted to do is discuss with council to see what dates you'd be interested. The dates available at this point are July 29th, 30th, August 4th, 5th, 6th, or 11th. 28th was requested, but it is already a council meeting and we're rejecting that date.
I'd like the 29th.
Of this month?
Sure.
That would be a Wednesday.
What was that for, sir?
That is for-
Tabletop exercise for emergency measures,
Oh, okay.
for emergency preparedness.
And so what we go through is a mock exercise.
And that'll be here?
It'll most likely be here.
I missed that last time.
I don't think we covered that, like, it was right at the beginning though.
Yeah, yeah.
Came on board, yeah.
We did it with St. Andrews here, actually.
Yeah.
I remember.
Okay, so what day is good for everybody?
The 29th is good.
Sure.
Is that all day or?
It
2.5
says
hours.
2.5 hours, a couple hours, and would it be in the evening, I would assume?
I would think it would be in the afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah, that's staff too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
They're all
know,
day and you can bring them in at night too.
well,
The last time we did it on a Saturday.
and the other thing is, I mean, if all the staff is to be participating, we can't really shut the office for 2.5 hours unless we advertise that it's gonna be closed for the afternoon of the 29th or something like that.
I mean, all our people, like public works, everybody.
I don't know how many public works are involved.
Would fire?
Oh, this was like the tabletop emergency?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a variety of different
Yeah.
involved.
Yes.
I have seen firemen there though, too.
They were here last.
They were here last time.
Yeah, because they need to know where we're going. So is the 29th good with everybody then, and we'll go from there?
Wednesday, yeah.
Just in case if it turns out to be the numbers, and I have to take into consideration social distancing, we may have to look at the tabletop exercise in another location. The one I would probably look at is the narrow fire hall. As you've seen, it has a fair amount of space in their meeting room, and we could probably use that one for the tabletop exercise, depending on the number of people we have. It would have, just as a heads up, the 29th during the morning, I am committed to working with the WMR that I'll fill you in later on.
Okay, do we want to pick an alternate day in case the 29th doesn't work now for Shelley?
Definitely.
What's the next date?
30th?
30th? We'll go the 30th. Or unless somebody else has
I
something.
didn't know I got
Sooner
that.
the better.
Yeah, they're all good.
Yeah, either day would work. Today.
Okay, thank you. What I'll do is we'll let Shelley know and negotiate something, and we'll get back to you as quickly as possible.
You got it? No, I think those are all those are. Okay, so we picked our dates there, July 29th or 30th. And the next one we have is the RRPD education session. And I'll let Deepak go through that one also. It is to do with the workplace climate assessment that was done by Achieve Center for Leadership. So Deepak, if you have any more details.
Beyond that, it's basically a workplace climate assessment that was done, added. I don't have any of the details as to what happened at that or the result of the workplace, but they're offering a complete all-council education session to present those findings, and all council members are invited from all councils that are part of the Red River Planning District. The session will be hosted on Zoom, so you have multiple options. One is that you can do it from your own home, or come to the council chamber here and we can schedule it.
Okay, so once, I don't know if we're, like, I probably would end up doing it from home, but it is on August the 26th from 1:30 to 2:30. And we will wait for Jennifer to send out additional information as to the Zoom access code.
Correct. And so just like other webinars that we've already been doing and experimenting with here, I'll register us for this council chamber for anyone who wants to attend here, great, and the others will receive it via email. Now, we do have a motion associated with this one for to make sure that what it says, that it identifies the councillors to be authorized to attend this education session. So did you want to make that decision?
Well, I guess we could, but I guess I'm thinking we have been here at many other webinars and things like that, and we've really not had any resolutions for those.
Correct.
So, you know, times are different, and I think until we kind of get back on track here and are attending meetings outside of the chamber, that do we specifically need a resolution?
I would say we wouldn't necessarily need a resolution considering all the other ones,
Right.
because it was an education seminar and associated. We
Yeah,
kept it there, but we can just receive it as information,
yeah.
and then councillors can let me know who wants to attend at the
Right.
chamber.
Normally we would, because we'd be traveling somewhere, and
Correct.
because of COVID and everything else, when we all come here, I know that there's still, you know, a cost if anybody comes here, but if I'm sitting at home, their time is charged, but that's it. So. I don't know, I mean, to do a resolution after the fact for all the ones that we've attended, I don't think it's worth it either. I think maybe we should say as of August the 1st, we'll start doing resolutions for all those attendances again.
Sure, as of August 1st,
Or even for next week, if there's anything that comes up in our regular meeting.
okay.
Okay.
Did they come up with a time for the 29th for that training session for emergency measures?
No.
Okay.
Deepak
I will
will have to
report
get
back.
that from Shelley.
Okay.
Okay, so the next one we have is the Manitoba Water Services Board, and there's a letter attached there for those that read it. It's about the water treatment plant upgrade design.
Is that the soccer or?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So, basically, they're saying that the estimated cost of the project is $200,000, and we would be on the hook for $100,000. So.
Correct. And with, this is information for council to let you know that the approval has occurred. We'll be sending back a letter identifying it, that it's coming as cash, because I don't think we did any borrowing to do this part of the budget. And so what they're saying is it's been authorized, that request was made, and then and all it does is the design We still have a request into the Water Services Board for the increase in costs associated with those upgrades, and that decision has not been made, and it'll still need to come back to council.
Were we not given $1 million grant to what?
Yeah.
Yes, but the price, that was many, many years ago,
Yeah,
and the price has gone up, and it's double that.
but the grant's still sitting there for us.
Correct.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, that was, I think, in 2015 or 2016 that we got that. So, go ahead, Councillor Spicer, you're patiently waiting.
I guess I have a clarification question on this one.
Okay,
It relates to the presentation that was made at WMR. Is this just for water softening, or is this for expanding treatment facilities also?
very good question. This is about water softening. The presentation that was done with WMR, I am contacting the executive director, and I'm meeting with the engineers. I am not satisfied with the numbers that were presented, and I'm not confident that those numbers are correct. Greg and I will plan to meet, probably bring Dick Menon in as well, and we'll meet at a technical level with the engineering company that did that review, because Greg and I looked at these numbers. We're not confident of them. I did do a screenshot for council to share with council on that. And those numbers, if we want to discuss that for a second, are not looking very promising. And that's a very good question. Do we expend any money if we don't have the capacity to expand?
Well, and part of the reason why I asked the question was, is if you remember correctly, I was a little concerned at the total cost of just, all we're doing is softening water, and this is $4 million. Now, if we were expanding treatment, then I understand the number, right?
Mhm.
But if we're not, it seems like a lot,
For a filter.
you know? Like,
We all said that. It's a lot of money for soccer.
like how many houses are in this? 600?
I think approximately,
Yeah.
like, it's servicing the soccer area at this
Might be
point.
cheaper to put a water pump in everybody's house.
If that's all we were doing, I think it
Well, then
is,
that's,
yes.
the question relates to that, right?
Correct.
Like, it must be more than just salt.
I know that their design did take into consideration expansion of that, and I think there is already possibly work to look at expanding it further. It's also important to make sure that we have a water treatment facility for a municipality, especially when we start looking at regional planning.
Yeah.
So to the level, I think some of that was requirements for us as well. But again, the study, what it does is it gives us a much more definitive numbers, because what we've had is estimates, and obviously the funding that was approved was short by 50% of those estimates. And we need to be on top of this if we're going to ever look at expanding.
It's just some things seem to not match up, so, you know, I'm just looking for clarification.
And I will follow up on that. Thank you, Councilor. And as you can see, they identified our capacity at
19%, I think it was, by memory,
yes.
for treatment.
Unallocated treatment capacity, they're saying 8%.
Oh,
9%, 19% was unallocated reservoir capacity. And so both of those numbers seem unrealistic compared to the usage of what's there.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure if these numbers were a little off or what was going on. It just didn't all seem to make sense.
I would agree with you, Councillor, that's what caught my attention. It also caught Councillor David Sutherland's attention as well at the presentation we were to inside the council chamber at the time.
Okay, anything else on this one? Do we have a resolution for this one, Deepak?
No,
Okay,
it's for information.
okay. Okay, so we're accepting the offer and you're gonna sign it then? We are going to sign it?
Yes.
Okay. Did we ever pass a resolution to end?
Council has already authorized this.
Perfect.
Or
Thank you, that's all I needed to know. Okay, so that is all the items, on the agenda prior to going in camera. So I'm going to ask Colleen to please stop recording, and we'll take a 5-minute break or so, and then we'll go in camera when we come back.
we should pass the motion, Madam Mayor.
Okay, then can you read it, please?
Resolved, council recess the regular meeting and go in camera to discuss legal and personnel issues, and further be it resolved that all matters discussed are to remain confidential as per section 83(1)D of the Municipal Act.
And I believe Councillor Boulanger had his hand up to move that, and Councillor Strang seconds that. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Okay, we need to go have that.
Colleen's going to stop the recording now.
Are we okay to take a break? Sorry.
We're just waiting for Colleen to stop recording.